issues again that come up and also affect gender. The next item on legal issues is sex work. I also that and marginalized groups, sex work and marginalized groups. Prostitution, a big issue there. I think 80% of the prostitutes in the world are of one gender, and they have very little means of protecting themselves from contamination. The laws criminalize them, so they are afraid of even going out there to get protection of the law, and they are also harassed by the same law enforcers, the policemen, because of vague laws, because of non-availability of laws. So issues around prostitution really need to be thought about, because prostitution can then impact a lot on the incidence and increase of AIDS and the HIV in the society. Trafficking in males and females for sex purposes, also a big issue there, and we need to legislate around those issues. And then we have MSMs, men sleeping with males. This is an issue, especially in penal institutions, prisons, where they know that the incidence is there, but there is no active means to either regulate it, provide condoms, or otherwise control it. And those are issues we need to think about. And those males in penal institutions are exposed, and we need to have legislation to protect that kind of thing. We have men sleeping with men voluntarily. Again, we need to find a way of regulating so that we can control it. And then we have men sleeping with men and sleeping with women. Again, a big issue out there. Some of those things we need to think about as we are legislating gender issues and stuff like that. We need not turn a blind eye to it, but we need to find a way of dealing with it somehow. And then women. Women, again, is a legal item on its own. We know the place of women in our patriarchal societies and how all this would impact on their HIV status if they were to have it. We have issues around access to treatment, a big problem, because we know the gender roles. When you wake up, you have so many domestic chores to attend to, so that going to the hospital to get treatment may not be a priority. I have to wake up, I have to fetch water, I have to get food on the table, I have to till the shopper, I have to do so many things, so that access to treatment becomes an extra and not a positive thing. And it might be an issue. Distances to the clinics may be an issue as well. So that when we are coming up with programs, we must make sure that the clinic centers are accessible within every so many communities, so that this cannot be an issue around the domestic cause that people have to deal with. Property ownership, we need to have laws that will therefore allow women to own property and reduce poverty. Poverty impacts on your ability to actually even negotiate around safer sex practices. So those are issues we need to deal with. Marital rape, I see a big look at, so I think I need to rush now, rushing. Sorry. Marital rape, again, another area there. Do we have the capacity to refuse sex to a partner you know is definitely HIV? What can you do about it? Those are issues we need to deal with. Reproductive health rights were covered very well by my colleagues, so I'll rush through that. Sexual violence and harassment, rape, being harassed sexually in all kinds of ways. How can we deal with that? Because this is also part of these issues. And then customs and traditional practices like wife inheritance, FGM, and all those other things. How can we deal with that around legislation and HIV? Then when it comes to children, we have the issues of orphans and inheritance and birth registration. Those are all issues. How do we deal with these children who have been left behind? How are we doing them? Caregivers, who will give care to these people? How do we deal with young children and orphans who are also heading families? How do we deal with that? Sexual abuse of children is another issue. We were just reading the paper today. A 10-year-old was defiled by an adult man of whatever. I mean, how do you deal with those issues around when you're thinking about this? Child marriages, another big area. Last week we were being told of a place where girls are going to school and therefore not available for early marriages anymore, and young boys are not going to school, so the boys talk to the school to look for wives because they want wives. So it's true when it happens. Then we have mother-to-child transmission, again, an issue, not to criminalize, but how do we manage it? When we are doing this, we have to be very sensitive. Sexual and economic exploitation of children, another area that can also impact on HIV and AIDS. Biomedical research protection. Again, we have to talk about things like informed consent, the right to withdraw your consent, confidentiality, compensation should it go wrong, and an ethics board to actually assure us that what is going on in the biomedical research is good. Again, here we need consent. We need to be aligned to gender issues. Once we had a case scenario in Kenya where children were taken in for some HIV, some testing research, which no one seemed to know about, and which actually we do not know how it will impact the children 5 years down the road, because there were no ethics or standards around the research. So these are real issues, gender issues that we need to think about. Information, access to information was talked about by Kambu and Glenn, so I will not go back down that road. Now, access to medicines, again, another issues around cost, access, and patents and free trade agreements, all impact on this in one way or another. So these are the legal issues around gender and HIV that we need to deal with, and that I will look at when I'm looking at the law. I quickly just went through the laws. Okay, injected drug use, another area around access to needles, whether we can have an exchange regime for needles, whether we can have drug use to reduce other drugs to reduce your dependency on drugs and stuff like that. So those are other issues again we're dealing with. I'll not go through those because those are just the bills that we have in the region dealing with that. I will quickly go into just a summary. Maybe now I'll just summarize that in the region, most of the laws are there to protect most of these issues, but they do not clearly give the gender impact of these issues. And the written law and application thereof, there's a disconnect. So that on the ground, even though the law may be good saying no discrimination, the law saying no partner notification unless ABCD, we still have criminalization on the other hand. We have the issues where the policy on the ground is not equal to the law that we have in the books, and we need to find a way of tying up these two so that we have optimum protection for gender issues around HIV and AIDS. I will be doing an in-depth analysis of each law and each whatever, so that in the final report that shall come out clearly, so that we'll be able to capture where the gaps are and be able to find a way of addressing those gaps. Just to say that I think the EAC bill is very, very progressive in most of these issues. It's doing quite some big things. A few gaps which can be addressed in the future or by policy, but the bill is really, really quite progressive on issues where the local laws did not do it, where the Kenyan law did do it, the Tanzanian law did do it, the Burundi law did do it. So that the EAC bill coming into law, therefore becoming law for the entire region, would be very useful for us in terms of gender, bridging the gender gap for HIV and AIDS. Thank you all so very much.